Hey friends, tonight we're venturing far from the castles and kings to the quiet, crooked lanes of medieval villages, places where ordinary people watched the sky with uneasy eyes, and the full moon brought more than just beauty. It brought fear, rituals, and the sense that the world could change overnight. Before we get settled in, take a moment to like the video and subscribe if you find these strange corners of history as fascinating as I do. Drop a comment with your location and what the moon looks like tonight. Now, dim your lights, get comfortable, and let's step softly into a world where the moon ruled more than just the tides. It shaped everyday life. The night watch doubled patrols when full moon lit the fields. When you close your eyes and try to imagine the landscape of a medieval village at night, you might think first of darkness, deep, layered shadows falling across low cottages and narrow dirt paths, the hush of distant animals settling for sleep, and the gentle lull of quiet routines winding down. But there were certain nights when darkness was not a reliable companion. When the moon, full and silver, crested above the horizon, its pale glow swept across the open fields, casting every fence, hedge, and haystack in a soft, dreamlike radiance. This was no ordinary darkness. This was the moonlit night that called the night watch into doubled vigilance, a time when the villagers' peace depended upon footsteps and eyes, twice as many as usual, moving through fields painted in light. Imagine yourself as one of these watchmen. The fabric of your cloak is coarse, and the night air is brisk. Each time your boot meets the earth, the grass is cool and bent beneath your tread. The village lies just behind you, a cluster of timbered houses, the thatched roofs drowsing under the gentle blue-white light. Somewhere, a dog shifts in its sleep. The world feels both wide and enclosed. It is the moon itself that keeps you alert, for the villagers believe what the elders have always said: thieves and poachers move most confidently when the fields are aglow, shadows long but easily read, and honest folks safely asleep. On the nights of the new moon, when darkness blanketed every path and hedge, patrols moved with less urgency, their lanterns bobbing faintly as they traced familiar routes. But on the nights of the full moon, everything changed. Watchmen doubled their numbers, shifting in pairs and sometimes even threes. Quiet footfalls through dew-wet grass were no longer taken for the harmless passing of a fox or a stray dog. Instead, each sound, the crack of a twig, the brush of a cloak, was heard as an omen, a warning that somewhere in these fields, someone might be slipping between barns and gardens, taking what was not theirs. This was a community built on a fragile balance. Every harvest, every egg, every winter store mattered. The rhythm of their lives depended on safeguarding what little they had. A single theft might mean hunger when the snow fell. For many villagers, the idea of loss was as chilling as the night itself. The bright full moon, so lovely and poetic to us now, was for them a mixed blessing, illuminating the familiar world, but also making it porous, visible, exposed. The night watch itself was not a profession for the faint of heart. These men, and sometimes, in dire seasons, women, were chosen by rotation or necessity, their duty shaped as much by custom as by fear. They wrapped themselves in woolen cloaks, carried sturdy staffs or simple pikes, and paced the fields and lanes, careful to move quietly and listen well. Their work was not about confrontation. It was about presence, about reminding anyone lurking in the moonlight that the village did not sleep unguarded. They watched for movement at the edge of gardens, for the glint of eyes in hedgerows, for doors that seemed out of place, or the soft impression of recent footprints in the loam. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth, especially in spring. Sometimes, the fields were striped with early mist that glowed silver in the moonlight. You might hear the soft call of an owl, or the distant echo of water running in the mill race. In these quiet hours, time seemed to stretch. The watchmen murmured softly to each other, sharing stories, passing the slow, moonlit hours with the kind of small talk born out of shared duty and the need to remain awake. From time to time, a watchman would pause at the edge of a barn and listen, just listen, to the small, muffled world inside. The low breathing of cattle, the shifting of straw, a restless hen clucking softly on her perch. The watch was a lesson in patience. Most nights, there was nothing to report except the peaceful passage of time. But the awareness of possibility lingered. a constant struggle between calm and the potential for disruption. The villagers knew their history well, stories told and retold of livestock lost, of mysterious footprints appearing overnight, of a missing chicken or a stolen sack of grain. Each story became another reason to double the patrols, another justification for vigilance. It was not only the threat of theft that haunted these moonlit fields. Poachers, too, found advantage in the moon's illumination. The forests and meadows beyond the tilled land teemed with deer, rabbits, and wild fowl. Poaching was a crime, but also a necessity for some. In lean years, a snare set in the woods or a swift, silent arrow could mean survival for a hungry family. Yet, for the lords who owned these lands and for the village as a whole, poaching was a loss, a subtraction from the community's fragile share. The Night Watch, then, was a presence both protective and regulatory, holding the community together by keeping both outsiders and desperate insiders at bay. Over time, the tradition of the doubled patrol on full moon nights became woven into the fabric of village life. It was as much a ritual as it was a precaution, a recurring reassurance to the anxious and the vulnerable. The repetition of the patrols, the measured pace, the silent camaraderie of the watchmen, all these things brought comfort as much as security. They served as a reminder that even in the face of uncertainty, the rhythm of shared effort and responsibility could keep fear at bay. The world outside the village rarely intruded, but the memory of distant dangers, the threat of roaming bandits, rumors of wars, the ever-present specter of famine, remained in the background, like the low hum of a distant bell. Within this small, moonlit world, each villager's safety depended upon the eyes and ears of those willing to pace the fields through the night, alert yet calm, patient yet persistent. As dawn approached and the moon began to fade, the night watch would make its final rounds. The sky would shift from deep blue to soft, gray-pink, and the fields would once again become familiar, ordinary. The doubled patrols would slip quietly back to their cottages, their duty done, replaced by the gentle bustle of morning chores. The village would awaken, the dangers of the night receding into memory until the next full moon called the watchmen once more into the silver fields. So, as you imagine yourself in that ancient, drowsy world, where vigilance is a rhythm, and even the moon's beauty brings both anxiety and reassurance, you can feel the gentle repetition of their lives. Night after night, month after month, the quiet march of the doubled patrol is both a tradition and a gentle defense against the unknown. In this small way, the village endures. And as sleep begins to blur the edges of memory and imagination, you drift quietly with them, beneath the silver moon. The secret ritual of covering wells to thwart moonlight curses. Imagine yourself in a small, sun-warmed village centuries ago, where days follow the reliable rhythm of sun and shadow. Here, life is guided not by clocks but by bells and seasons, and the boundary between known science and ancient superstition is gentle and shifting. Every household relies on a well, a simple stone circle descending into darkness, lined with moss and the faint, echoing drip of water from deep below. Wells are lifelines, each one carefully watched, occasionally cleaned, and always central to the steady, unhurried pulse of the village. As dusk settles and lamps glow behind thick shutters, a quiet anticipation stirs in the lanes. Tonight, as every month, the full moon will rise, luminous and broad, trailing its silvery light across fields, rooftops, and, most importantly, the open mouths of wells. On these nights, a quiet ritual unfolds in countless homes. Just before the moon is high, families gather outside, arms wrapped in shawls against the night's slow chill. Someone, usually the eldest woman or the most trusted servant, brings out a length of faded cloth, sometimes linen, sometimes rough wool, or even a treasured old blanket. With careful hands, they stretch the fabric over the well, weighing it down with smooth stones or tying it securely with cord. No one rushes. The motions are practiced, the silence companionable. If you pause to listen, you might hear the low murmur of a prayer or a child repeating a rhyme learned from a grandmother. Sometimes, the youngest watch wide-eyed, asking why this matters, and the answer is always gentle, a quiet assurance. Moonlight can taint what lies beneath. That is the lesson woven into the village's nightly pattern. The belief is both simple and profound. Moonbeams, it is said, holds secrets, sometimes benevolent, often dangerous. The full moon, so beautiful and bright, was also thought to carry invisible dangers, capable of slipping silently into the depths of a well and spoiling the precious water. People whisper of fever rising days later, of the old or the very young falling ill without warning. And if a family forgets to cover their well, neighbors might trade glances, quietly noting the omission. When coughs begin or a child grows listless, explanations come easily. It must have been the moon, seeping sickness into the water, all because a single ritual was missed. This monthly custom was not born of ignorance, but of centuries of observation, stories, and a kind of practical caution. Even in places where science was slowly reaching the countryside, and educated voices spoke of germs and invisible particles, the rituals endured. Part of it was habit. Part of it was comfort, a way to push back against the many unknowns that shaped daily survival. Covering the well required little effort and cost nothing but time and attention. And in a world where misfortune struck without warning, rituals like this offered a sense of protection, however fragile. If you drift through these villages, you might notice differences in the ritual from household to household. In some, the covering was a communal event, neighbors exchanging greetings as they checked that every well on the lane was shielded. In others, the act was private, the cloth laid down in silence, followed by a final backward glance before the family retreated indoors. The choice of fabric could become a matter of pride, embroidered with symbols, passed down from mother to daughter, or simply patched together from scraps. Whatever the method, the message was clear: the moon must be kept at bay. It's tempting to look back and smile at such beliefs. But life was delicate then, each day balanced against illness, poor harvests, and uncertain change. When something as ordinary as water could become dangerous, any action, no matter how small, could feel deeply meaningful. In the quiet hours of the night, when the moonlight poured over fields and rooftops, there was comfort in knowing you had done your part. Even if no one could see it, a well-placed cloth was a barrier between health and harm. Not everyone agreed, of course. Occasionally, a skeptic would argue that moonlight was harmless, that water was tainted by reasons no one could see or control. Some pointed to the movement of frogs, the shifting of roots, the taste of iron or clay. But few wanted to risk being blamed should illness follow. If a fever swept through the village, and it was known that your family had left the well uncovered, suspicion grew heavy. There are stories, repeated in gentle tones, rarely written down, of old feuds sparked by a forgotten ritual, of sickbeds visited with a mixture of pity and whispered accusation. Over time, as lanterns gave way to gaslight and doctors brought new knowledge, these beliefs softened. Yet, the gentle ritual of covering wells on full moon nights lingered longer than most customs. Some families continued for the sake of tradition, others because a memory of loss ran too deep to ignore. And even today, in some corners of the world, you might find a well with a neatly tied cloth on a moonlit night, a quiet nod to ancestors who once fought the darkness with nothing but fabric, caution, and hope. The rhythm of life, marked by rituals both practical and mysterious, shaped communities in ways science alone could never explain. There was reassurance in routine, in the steady repetition of acts performed for generations. It is easy to dismiss these habits as relics of a less enlightened age, but they were woven into the fabric of survival, a gentle reminder that even the smallest gesture, like a cloth drawn over water, could mean the difference between comfort and uncertainty. So, as you settle into the slow drift of history, imagine yourself in the cool hush of a village night, moonlight pooling in the silent lanes, and every well softly hidden beneath a patchwork of cloth. In that small, simple act, you glimpse a world where hope and fear, science and superstition, are folded gently together, one quiet night at a time. The quiet bands on singing to keep spirits from gathering. Imagine yourself in a small, wind-blown village on the edge of a dark forest. The thatched cottages cluster close together, their walls thick with the scent of damp earth and wood smoke. At night, the fields and lanes grow so quiet that even the creak of a door carries for yards. Each family's fire glows behind shutters, a gentle halo of warmth protecting the living from the long reach of night. And yet, on certain evenings, particularly when the moon rides full and silver above the trees, a subtle, shared hush falls heavier than usual. On these nights, you would not hear the sweet, wandering melodies of folk songs drifting between homes. For as the elders insist, even the gentlest tune might summon the company of those who do not belong among the living. This was not a ban enforced by punishment or decree, but by quiet, generational agreement. Songs, especially folk songs carried by memory rather than parchment, were considered something more than entertainment. The villagers believed melodies had power, perhaps a way to call back what once was, or to remind the unseen of what they could never again possess. The full moon, so often a symbol of light and clarity, was paradoxically a time of hidden danger. Its brightness, they whispered, made the boundary between worlds dangerously thin. If you allowed your voice to rise on such a night, the spirits, restless, cold, always listening, might slip through the cracks beneath eaves and rooftops, drawn to warmth, to song, to life itself. Daily life in this setting followed rhythms shaped by sun and season. Mornings arrived with the scrape of iron pots and the shuffle of feet on packed earth. Children gathered eggs from straw, the hens muttering in their coops. Women kneaded dough thickened with last year's grain, while men examined weathered fences or walked the fields, hoping for signs that this year's harvest would be better than the last. In such villages, everyone understood hardship. The struggle against hunger, chill, and the unpredictable sky was constant. Yet, in spite of the weight of work, music often floated through the day. Old lullabies hummed at the cradle, working chants woven through shared labor, and at dusk, soft songs rising around the hearth. These melodies provided comfort, memory, and a sense of belonging, except, that is, on the forbidden nights. The tradition's roots stretched far beyond living memory, and no one could quite agree how or when it began. Perhaps it started with a tale, an ancestor returning in the guise of a chill breeze after a song was sung too late, or a sickness that followed laughter echoing out into the moonlight. Over generations, these stories hardened into custom, and custom became a form of quiet law. Newcomers sometimes found the prohibition odd or even quaint, but children learned not to test it. If a song slipped out by accident, a hush would descend, old hands would quietly cross themselves or murmur a charm, and the melody would be left to fade alone, unjoined. The fear was not only for spirits in the abstract. The community's sense of vulnerability was rooted in the simple physics of their world. Warmth was precious, health precarious, and every soul lost, whether to illness, cold, or the unexplained, left a mark. If people vanished or fever visited the village, it was easier, in some sense, to blame a broken taboo than to surrender to randomness. Belief that spirits envied the living their warmth and sought it out made sense in a world where the fire's light was often the only barrier against the night. Some nights, you might see an elder leaning against the doorframe, staring out into the moonlit lane, lips pressed tight. If you asked, they might tell you that song is a thread, fine as spider's silk, strong enough to bridge what should not be bridged. Or they might simply say, "We keep quiet on nights like these. It's how it's always been." There was comfort in the repetition of custom, in the idea that by following the same careful steps as those who came before, one could hold back the unknown. Of course, not every villager believed these tales. Some found private ways to defy the rule. A child whispering a tune beneath the covers, a lone shepherd humming as he walked the midnight fields, trusting the company of his dog more than any imagined phantom. Over time, as faith in old dangers faded, the bands loosened. Eventually, the prohibition became another village story, told to entertain children or to explain a chill that seemed to have no other cause. But even today, you might notice that in some corners of the world, a certain silence endures on bright, moonlit nights. Perhaps it is habit, or perhaps it is the gentle weight of old fears lingering just beneath the surface. As the moon climbs, voices fall. Windows close. The warmth of song is held in, protected, until dawn. And so, in the rhythm of their lives, the villagers navigated a world shaped as much by what was not sung as by the melodies they cherished. The quiet bands on singing served not just to ward off spirits, but to draw the living closer together, to remind them of the boundaries, both seen and unseen, that sheltered their small, flickering world. The ritual marking of door frames to repel lunacy and harm. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a sleeping village, just as dusk surrenders to night. The last color drains from the fields, leaving rooftops silvered by a patient, rising moon. You notice how the world feels different when the moon is full. Shadows lengthen, sounds sharpen, and the quiet is uneasy, as if something beneath the surface of ordinary life has subtly shifted. The villagers sensed this too. For generations, they believed the moon's brilliance was a mixed blessing, a celestial lamp for honest work, but also a beacon for danger, madness, and the unknown. In this gentle but apprehensive world, small rituals offered comfort, one of the most quietly enduring being the marking of door frames with the sign of an ash cross. Daily life immersion. The ash ritual, night settles. Behind every thick wooden door, families move with slow care. The evening meal is finished. Pots are cleaned with water drawn from a covered well. The air inside is thick with the scent of peat smoke, dried herbs, and the faint aroma of wax from half-burnt candles. Before sleep, one ritual remains. You might picture a parent, weary but methodical, approaching the threshold with a fragment of last winter's ash clutched in hand. By the dim light of a stubby candle, they draw a rough cross high on the lintel, whispering a fragment of prayer or perhaps simply muttering for protection against lunacy, that old, shapeless fear said to ride the moonbeams straight into the mind. The texture of the ash is soft, leaving a smudge on the fingers. The cross is rarely perfect, sometimes just two intersecting lines, sometimes a full mark repeated for each door. The ritual is not loud or theatrical. It unfolds in quiet certainty, part of the rhythm of their lives, marking the difference between a house left exposed to the wildness of night and one quietly shielded from harm. Event/biography, a tradition across generations. No single person invented this custom. Rather, it drifted into daily life over centuries, woven from scraps of folklore, religious teaching, and practical wisdom. There are records from parish priests mentioning marks against the moon madness in village inventories, as well as quiet references in letters exchanged between families separated by long, muddy roads. Even as beliefs changed with time, and authorities sometimes frowned on superstitious habits, the ritual persisted, perhaps because it was so simple, so humble, and demanded nothing more than a handful of ash and a moment of intention. There are old tales of nights when the moon seemed to hang lower and brighter than usual, when neighbors would gather the next morning and quietly compare the darkness they felt pressing at their windows. Sometimes a person, usually one who had wandered out under that silvered sky, might fall into troubled sleep or babble strange stories at dawn. These moments, unsettling but never fully understood, became proof that the moon held sway over mind and spirit alike, and that the door frame, if marked, could serve as a final barrier. Mystery, archaeology, culture, meaning, and symbolism. The use of ash is not accidental. In many places, ash represented both what was lost to fire and what remained, purified, transformed, and made sacred by burning. Crossing it on the door frame, especially by candlelight, felt like binding together the forces of light and darkness, protection and destruction, memory and renewal. The cross itself, a symbol older than Christianity, spoke quietly to the intersection of worlds. Inside and outside, safety and risk, sleep and waking. What is most striking is how these marks lingered in silence. By day, they faded or smudged, sometimes swept away by a careless leaf. But in the minds of the household, their presence persisted, a testament to the way fear and hope are both hidden and revealed in ordinary gestures. Even today, archaeologists sometimes discover faint traces of these markings on ancient door frames, the darkened wood bearing subtle reminders of hands long vanished, families who moved through the same daily cycles of worry and reassurance. Social, elite, contrasting daily life, across classes and contexts. This ritual belonged mostly to the everyday people, the ploughmen, shepherds, and small householders who could not afford elaborate amulets or ornate protection charms. In great houses and manor halls, protections were more likely to take the form of inscribed prayers or iron keys, but even there, a serving maid might quietly mark the threshold of her quarters. The humble cross of ash was accessible to all, neither forbidden nor quite official, existing in the gray space between folk custom and faith. Over time, as ideas of science, medicine, and the nature of illness changed, the custom faded. People no longer spoke of moon madness in the same terms, yet the impulse to shield one's home, to guard against invisible harm, remained. Locks grew stronger, superstitions turned into habits, but the memory of the ash cross endured, passed down in stories and the faintest smudge above a forgotten doorway. Conclusion: the quiet comfort of ritual. So, as you drift through this imagined night, consider the way fear shapes quiet routines, and how hope finds its expression in gestures almost too small to notice. The marking of the door frame was never meant to conquer the unknown, only to hold it gently at bay, to create, if only for a night, the feeling that something ancient and nameless could be kept outside. The ash would be brushed away by morning, leaving little trace. But for those who lived by candlelight, lulled to sleep by the steady hush of distant fields and the faint glow of a watchful moon, it was enough. In the rhythm of their lives, in every careful marking, lies a reminder. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes not from certainty, but from the gentle repetition of hope, hidden behind closed doors, passed from hand to hand, and never fully forgotten. The silent procession to bless livestock against moon illness. Imagine a village folded quietly into the hollows of a wide valley, its timbered barns and rough-hewn cottages scattered along paths worn smooth by generations. The days here are much like the ones before, measured not by clocks, but by the patient turning of seasons and the persistent rhythm of chores. Yet, there are nights when even this ordinary pace slows to a hush, and something almost ritualistic stirs beneath the full moon's gentle glare. You can picture it: cattle lying in their pens, horses shifting in their stalls, the faint metallic clink of harness chains as someone makes a last check before sleep. It's a world thick with the scent of straw and the musky warmth of animals, a world where survival is never quite taken for granted. Among the many threats faced by villagers, bad weather, famine, disease, there is one worry that seems to arrive most often under the cold, watchful eye of the full moon: sudden, mysterious illness among the animals. The belief that the moon could bring harm is not a quirk of a single culture or a stray superstition. For centuries, people living close to the land have watched their animals with anxious eyes during the brightest nights. They noticed that sometimes, after a moonlit evening, a calf would become listless, or a sheep would stop eating, or a cow's milk would sour. Lacking the tools or knowledge to understand invisible infections or nutritional deficiencies, villagers turned to older explanations, ones that fit the patterns they saw in the world around them. And so, the moon illness acquired its own customs of defense, as practical as any lock or fence, and as old as memory itself. It began with a sense of unease that spread as the full moon rose, lighting the fields and sharpening the silhouettes of barns and trees. In some communities, the response was loud, bells were rung, drums beaten, as if to scare away whatever unseen forces threatened the herd. But in many places, the ritual was a silent procession, deliberate and careful, meant to comfort both animals and their keepers. Picture yourself on such a night. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and trampled grass. Shadows spill from the eaves, and the moon's light turns every dewdrop into a silver bead. Men, women, and sometimes even children gather near the main barn, clutching sprigs of dried herbs or small vessels of water that has been blessed by a priest earlier that day. There are no shouted prayers, no dramatic gestures, only the soft tread of boots on packed dirt, and the occasional low murmur of words half-whispered into the night. As the procession moves slowly around the barns, holy water is sprinkled along doorways, on the lintels of stalls, and across the broad backs of animals where they lie or stand. Protective verses are recited, not loud enough to disturb the livestock, but softly enough that they become almost a lullaby, weaving together faith and repetition. Some will cross themselves, or gently touch the heads of oxen and horses, marking a quiet sign of hope against the unknown. The scene repeats itself, season after season. The procession is not only about warding off the so-called moon sickness. It is also a gesture of solidarity, a small ritual that gives villagers a sense of agency over fate. For a few moments, under the open sky, human hands and voices form a shield that seems to stand between the fragile lives in their care and the larger, indifferent forces of the world. There is a certain comfort in the act, even if no one truly knows if it works. Perhaps you have felt a similar kind of comfort, lighting a candle for luck, saying a small, familiar phrase before sleep, repeating a gesture passed down by those before you. The repetition itself creates a boundary, a gentle rhythm that soothes the mind and frames the night as something less mysterious and more manageable. Across Europe and beyond, versions of this moonlit procession take root. In some regions, certain herbs, rosemary, rue, or St. John's wort, are scattered in the hay or woven into wreaths hung above barn doors. In others, villagers avoid looking animals directly in the eye on these nights, convinced that a stray glance could allow the sickness to leap from human to beast. The details shift from village to village, but the purpose remains: to guard the silent herd, to fend off the unseen, and to keep hope alive. Contrast this with the world of the wealthy or the noble. For them, livestock might be managed by stewards, and concern for moon illness could be dismissed as a peasant fancy. Yet even in great houses, there were moments of uncertainty, years when disease cut through herds, when stables were emptied not by thieves but by something neither blade nor lock could prevent. In those rare moments, the powerful might send for learned physicians, but some would also quietly request holy water or recall a childhood rhyme meant to keep the moon's gaze at bay. If you listen carefully, you might sense the subtle tension beneath these rituals, a blend of faith, habit, and unspoken fear. Villagers could not ignore the pattern. Full moon, then sickness, any more than they could control the weather or the growth of crops. Their responses were not foolish, but rather, they were a way of managing anxiety in a world where the line between known and unknown was both thin and constantly shifting. Archaeologists sometimes find traces of these beliefs: worn prayer beads buried near barn doors, scraps of parchment tucked into beams, or even the faint remnants of chalk markings along threshold stones. These quiet markers linger, much like the stories themselves, a testament to the countless ways people tried to keep their animals, and by extension, their livelihoods, safe from what they could neither see nor understand. As dawn approaches and the moonlight begins to fade, the procession breaks apart. People drift back to their cottages, secure in the knowledge that they have done what they could. The animals settle again, shifting in the straw, the hush of the barn undisturbed but for the gentle rustle of wings in the rafters. Life resumes its usual steady rhythm, the rhythm that has carried villages through countless nights, through fear and uncertainty, and into the ordinary demands of another day. In the end, the silent procession is more than superstition. It is a window into the ancient relationship between people and the animals they depended on, and a reminder that even the quietest rituals have the power to shape the story of survival. The quiet ceasefire of feuding families during moonlit nights. Imagine a narrow valley, scattered with the slow, careful pattern of thatched rooftops and stone walls. In this world, feuds between families might last not years, but generations, shaping the rhythm of daily life as predictably as the coming of each season. Neighbors learned to navigate boundaries in silence, eyes lowered, words measured. Old wounds lingered like shadows at the edge of a fire's glow, never entirely gone, shaping everything from marriages to the routes taken to market each morning. Yet, even in a place so defined by quiet grudges and simmering disputes, there were nights when an invisible pause slipped gently across the village. A hush so soft it barely seemed real, yet so widely observed it became a custom stronger than law. The full moon, bright and untamed, rose above the fields, painting every roof and hedge in pale silver. And as its light deepened, a gentle ceasefire descended, as if the very air pressed a calming hand to every heart. The logic behind this ritual was woven from both fear and hope. Families whispered that the moon was a silent witness, its light a mark of judgment. Any harm done beneath its gaze would not simply fade with time. Instead, consequences might linger, trailing quietly through generations, tainting children yet unborn. The story went that blood spilled on a moonlit night was never truly washed away, that a curse would echo down family lines, shaping destinies in ways no one could predict. For this reason, bitter enemies would, without ever speaking a word, retreat behind closed shutters as the moon waxed full. Children were kept close, doors latched, voices soft and low. If a quarrel flared in the days before, it would pause as the moon brightened, neither side eager to tempt the fate that hovered, unseen, above the rooftops. If you wandered the lanes on such a night, you might sense the tension not as anger, but as an almost sacred quiet, a gentleness learned over decades. It was not an act of forgiveness, nor a sign that old hatreds had vanished. The rules of the ceasefire were unwritten but widely understood. No boundary would be crossed, no insult answered, no score settled until the moon waned and its power, for the moment, receded. Some families placed tokens at their doorways, a branch of rowan, a stone marked with chalk, quiet signals to neighbors that tonight, at least, no feud would be pursued. In fields and pastures, even the animals seemed to move with greater caution, as if sensing the delicacy of the moment. There were, of course, stories of those who broke the truce. The tales always ended the same way. The violator's line would suffer misfortune, sometimes subtle, sometimes sharp, a failed harvest, a sudden illness, a rift that would not heal. Over time, these stories served to reinforce the boundaries, giving even the most vengeful pause. Sometimes, an accidental meeting under the moon would be greeted with a silent nod and averted gaze, each party moving quickly along. The village itself became a kind of shared stage, every movement measured, every word left unspoken. This ritual had another effect as well. In the enforced stillness, people found moments of uneasy reflection. The bitter edges of old arguments softened, if only for a night. Children, forbidden to roam, might gather at a single hearth, hearing tales of past moons and bygone feuds. The moon became both shield and mirror, its light a reminder that even the deepest anger could be paused, if not undone. It was in these silent nights that some believed the possibility of peace might quietly take root, unnoticed but persistent. Sometimes, in the pause, one family might send a small token, bread, a folded note, a single flower, to a neighbor with whom they had long been at odds. More often, the truce simply offered a night's safety, a brief respite in an otherwise uneasy world. Not every village observed this tradition, and over time, as law and custom changed, the moonlit ceasefire faded. Yet, traces of it lingered. In some regions, stories are still told of families who found a kind of quiet strength in restraint, choosing caution over vengeance, at least for a single night each month. The logic might seem quaint, the fear of curses outmoded, yet beneath the superstition lay a subtle truth. Sometimes, the only thing that stands between conflict and quiet is the shared agreement to pause, to let the light fall where it will, and to wait for the night to pass. So, as you drift back through this valley, moonlight pooling across the hills, imagine the hush, the unspoken promise that holds anger at bay, if only until the dawn. In these moments, you glimpse a world shaped not only by conflict, but by the gentle, patient power of restraint. In this quiet, beneath the patient watch of the full moon, the ancient rhythm of truce and memory lingers on, soft as the silver light itself. The practice of sealing bread loaves to keep away wandering souls. Imagine yourself in a village where the first scents of morning are always thick with bread. Each cottage's hearth is more than just a source of warmth. It's a lifeline, a promise that hunger will not claim the family this winter. At the center of the village stands a low stone bakery, its chimney always whispering smoke, its windows fogged with steam. If you arrive just before dawn, you might see the baker's lamp still burning, casting golden pools across wooden tables thick with flour. The world beyond is silent, but inside, the air hums with quiet purpose, dough shaped and risen, crusts browning, the steady rhythm of work as ancient as the stones beneath the floor. Yet, as dusk descends and the last loaves cool on woven racks, another ritual begins. It is a gentle choreography performed not just by bakers, but by mothers, grandmothers, and anyone who has ever been entrusted with the village's most precious food. Each fresh loaf is carefully wrapped in linen, sometimes the same soft, faded cloths that have been handed down for generations, their folds scented with flour and thyme. Then, instead of being left exposed on shelves or tables, every loaf is placed inside a wooden chest, sometimes no bigger than a cradle, sometimes large enough to feed a household for a week. The chest itself might seem unremarkable to a stranger. Plain wood, worn smooth by use, its hinges oiled to keep out the damp. Yet to the villagers, it is more than a box, it is a boundary. For as long as anyone can remember, bread left uncovered at night has been a source of quiet unease. The elders say that warmth, so necessary to life, draws not just the living but the lost. Unseen spirits, wandering in the dark hours, are said to be forever searching for comfort, for reminders of a life they once knew. A loaf left unprotected, a symbol of sustenance and welcome, might prove too tempting for such visitors. No one can say exactly what harm a spirit hungry for bread might cause. Some claim the loaf would be found cold and heavy by morning, its blessing stolen. Others whisper that the spirit's touch could bring sickness or misfortune to the home. These fears linger at the edges of thought, rarely spoken aloud, yet guiding nightly routines with a gentle but unyielding hand. Sealing bread in linen and wood, then, is less a superstition than a habit woven into the fabric of daily life. It is a form of care, a way of protecting what the earth and labor have provided. Each action is unhurried. The folding of linen, the soft thud as the chest closes, the careful placing of the chest in a cool corner away from the window. Over time, these gestures accumulate their own meaning. They are as much about safeguarding hope as about warding off hunger or harm. Daily life in the village is shaped by cycles of light and dark, sowing and reaping, hunger and plenty. The baker's trade is central to this rhythm. Grain is ground in creaking mills, the flour sifted by hand. The dough is worked with a practiced patience, its texture changing from sticky resistance to a silken pliancy. On festival days, the loaves are shaped into braids or stamped with symbols to mark the season. On ordinary days, they are simple and round, their crusts golden, their centers soft. Bread is shared at every meal, its presence on the table both unremarkable and essential. As you watch the ritual of sealing the loaves, you notice how it mirrors other acts of protection. Just as windows are shuttered against night winds, and children are tucked beneath heavy quilts, so too is bread given its own shelter. The practice is not discussed at length, nor is it challenged. Even those who scoff at talk of wandering souls tend to follow the custom. Perhaps it is easier to perform the gesture than to tempt fate. Perhaps, on some level, everyone understands the fragility of fortune, the thin line that separates enough from not enough. In some homes, the wooden chest is marked with small carvings, patterns of wheat, swirling knots, or the sign of a protective charm. These decorations are not only pretty, they are believed to confuse or deter any wandering spirit bold enough to approach. The linen, too, might be embroidered with a family symbol, or simply worn smooth from years of use, its weave dense enough to shield the loaf from the night air. As the moon rises and the village quiets, the bakery's warmth lingers on the breeze, mixing with the scent of cool stone and distant hay. If you were to listen closely, you might hear only the faint creak of the bakery chest being closed, a gentle final act before sleep. And though most would deny believing in spirits, no one is eager to test what might happen if the custom were broken. Over centuries, this practice has faded in many places, replaced by cellophane and plastic wrap, or forgotten altogether as houses grew warmer and fears of wandering souls became distant memories. But in the rhythm of their lives, the villagers understood that the greatest protections are often the quietest. A fold of linen, a closed chest, the silent promise that what matters most will be kept safe for one more night. The belief that laundry left out would call misfortune home. Imagine yourself in a village so quiet that even the sound of wind rustling through the hedgerows feels amplified after sunset. The day's work is finished, fields rest in darkness. The sky, once golden, deepens into a familiar blue-black, pierced only by the gentle shimmer of distant stars and, soon, the confident glow of the full moon. In this moment, calm, but never careless, an old anxiety lingers. The villagers move with intention, and among them, you notice a particular choreography. Women, in small groups or alone, step out into their gardens and yards, gathering up shirts, linens, and handkerchiefs from the sagging lines. Their movements are practiced, yet faintly urgent, as they work to finish before the first moonbeams touch the grass. Daily life immersion. The rhythm of evening chores, the rhythm of their lives is measured in cycles, seasons, weeks, even the rising and setting of the moon. Laundry, washed with water drawn from the well and wrung by hand, is hung early in the day to dry beneath the sun. As dusk approaches, there is a quiet shift. The kitchen smells of cooling bread and wood smoke, while outside, a soft clatter signals the removal of pegs and the hurried folding of garments still faintly warm from daylight. You can almost feel the coolness on your hands as you shake out a pillowcase, scanning the sky for the first hint of silver. Even children know not to dawdle with the baskets, urged inside by mothers who watch the horizon with a wary eye. Biography/event. Generations of unquestioned habit. No law commands this ritual, no written rule enforces it. Yet, across generations, the act persists. There are stories, shared in hushed voices, of families who once forgot a towel or a child's shirt, only to be met with a string of small misfortunes. A cow gone dry, a sudden fever, quarrels that would not mend. In every retelling, the detail is clear. The forgotten laundry was blamed, the moon accused of drawing bad luck along the weave of cloth. These stories rarely contain malice or drama. Instead, they serve as gentle warnings, a kind of folk wisdom designed to safeguard not only the household's well-being, but its sense of control in a world so often unpredictable. The work is always quiet, never celebrated. No one boasts of having cleared the line in time, but the relief is real. A calm that settles only once the last item is safe indoors, folded in the familiar light of the hearth. Mystery, archaeology, culture, origins and meaning. Where does this belief come from? Like so many customs, its roots are tangled. Part ancient superstition, part observation, part caution. The moon, especially when full, has long been seen as a powerful force, shaping tides, stirring sleep, even, some believed, drawing madness or misfortune down to earth. Laundry, as something that intimately touched every member of the family, became a silent vessel, pure when cleansed and dried by the sun, but vulnerable beneath the moon's watchful gaze. To leave clothing outside at night, especially on the brightest nights, was to invite unseen forces into the home. The fabric might seem unchanged, but who could say what lingered in the threads? The logic is not always clear, but its power is real, a form of protection, repeated nightly, that creates order where there is uncertainty. Archaeologists sometimes find ancient cloth weights or pegs buried alongside thresholds, small, ordinary objects charged with the residue of anxiety and hope. Social, elite, contrasting daily life. Across the spectrum, this belief crossed the boundaries of class and region. In grand homes, where servants managed the linens, housekeepers gave the same instructions. Nothing left on the lines past sunset, especially at the full moon. In smaller cottages, the responsibility was personal. The act became a quiet moment of solidarity, neighbors sharing a knowing glance as they cleared their lines, a collective gesture of warding off bad luck without a single word exchanged. Over time, as scientific understanding grew and new explanations emerged for illness and ill fortune, the ritual lost its edge. Yet, even in households that claimed to scorn superstition, the habit often remained. Perhaps it was practicality, damp air, night animals, or the wish to avoid dew. But always, beneath those reasons, lingered a subtle, inherited caution. Conclusion: the enduring echo of ritual. Tonight, as you imagine yourself folding a last shirt and closing the door against the night, you might sense the comfort of repetition, a reassurance that, in a world governed by forces too large to master, there are small things you can control. The belief that laundry left out would call misfortune home may have faded, but the impulse to shield what is precious remains. A quiet ritual, marking the passage from day into night, woven through centuries by hands both careful and caring. In the end, whether for luck, for comfort, or simply for the rhythm of it, the old caution persists. Nothing left outside to greet the moon, nothing left exposed to what wanders beneath its steady, mysterious light. And so, behind closed doors, the household rests, protected by habit and hope, as another night quietly unfolds. The ritual of knotting threads to tangle moon spirits at bay. Imagine yourself in a quiet village long before the hum of modern comforts. Night has settled gently over the fields and gardens, draping cottages in a cool hush broken only by the occasional call of an owl or the distant bark of a dog. In the soft glow of the full moon, the world seems changed, sharper around the edges, shadows stretching across cobbled paths and wooden lintels. It's on such nights, when the moon hangs heavy and bright above the thatched rooftops, that you might notice a curious detail: clusters of colored threads, each tied into careful knots, dangling from the windows of almost every home. This is the night of the knotting ritual, a custom as unassuming as it is enduring. You might find, if you look closely, that these threads are not randomly chosen. Red for protection, blue for tranquility, yellow for hope, and white for purity. The practice is simple, but its roots run deep, woven into the rhythm of daily life for families whose nights are sometimes restless, whose sleep can feel precarious. Across the centuries, people have looked for patterns in the mysterious. They watched as the full moon triggered changes in both people and animals. Sleep that would not come, dreams that seemed too vivid, sudden chills, or an unexplained sense of unease. With so much left unexplained, they gave names and stories to these feelings, imagining wandering spirits drawn by the moon's silver light, eager to slip through cracks and into the warmth of sleeping rooms. It was said that spirits, like moths, could be distracted or waylaid by small, deliberate obstacles. And so, before families settled in for the night, the oldest in the house, or sometimes the youngest, eager to prove they could follow the old ways, would take a length of colored thread, knot it slowly and with intention, and hang it just inside the window frame. Each knot, according to tradition, would catch and hold a passing spirit, preventing it from drifting farther into the house. The process itself was gentle and repetitive. Imagine the feel of cotton or wool between your fingers, the soft pull as each knot was formed, the tiny snap as it tightened into place. There was a rhythm to it. Knot, twist, whisper a hope or prayer, knot again. For some, the ritual was accompanied by a murmured verse, perhaps no more than a quiet wish for peace. For others, it was a silent act, the meaning understood without words. In households with children, knotting threads became a kind of comfort before bed, a reminder that protection was possible, even if only through these simple acts. As the night wore on, the threads caught the faintest breeze, swaying in the moonlight like tiny sentinels. They were unobtrusive but ever-present, a gentle sign to both spirit and human that the boundary between inside and outside, seen and unseen, was being watched over. If you listen carefully, you might even hear the faint rustle as threads shifted, a sound as soft as the hush between heartbeats. The ritual of knotting threads was not unique to any single village or country. Variations of this practice echo across many cultures, each with its own colors, patterns, or stories. In some regions, a special knot was used only during certain times of the year. In others, a particular type of thread was believed to be more effective. Yet everywhere, the purpose was the same: to create a web of comfort and control in a world that could feel both vast and unpredictable. There are stories, too, of how the threads came to be replaced. If a knot broke free and fell to the floor, it was gently collected and burned or buried, returning the spirit to the earth or air. In the morning, new threads might be chosen, their colors reflecting the changing needs of the household: yellow for the sick, blue for those troubled by dreams, red for the anxious. In this way, the ritual adapted to the subtle shifts in family life, growing and changing but never disappearing altogether. Even those who doubted the literal truth of moon spirits rarely scoffed at the practice. In the gentle repetition of tying knots, there was a quiet logic, an acknowledgement that sometimes the smallest gestures carry the most comfort. The knots became a way of marking the transition from waking day to sleeping night, of signaling to all who entered that the home was a place of refuge, watched over by the unseen care of those within. Not every household relied only on threads. Some would pair the knotting ritual with sprigs of dried herbs, lavender or rosemary, tucked into the window sash. Others drew protective symbols on the glass, or whispered an old rhyme as the last knot was tied. The ritual could be as elaborate or as simple as needed, blending practicality with tradition in ways that blurred the line between superstition and daily routine. In the homes of the wealthy, glass windows might replace wooden shutters, but the threads would still appear, perhaps finer and more decorative, perhaps knotted by a servant but hung in the same quiet hope. For those living on the margins, even a scrap of worn yarn would do, for the meaning lay not in the cost, but in the act itself. If you could peer into these houses as midnight approached, you would see the threads glowing faintly in the moonlight, a tapestry of intention and care. You might sense how each knot, each choice of color, told a story of what the household valued and feared. And as the night wore on, those sleeping within would rest just a little easier, trusting that the boundary between their dreams and the moonlit world outside was held fast by something as gentle and persistent as hope. In the end, the ritual of knotting threads to tangle moon spirits is a reminder that, throughout history, people have shaped their nights with small acts of faith, thread by thread, knot by knot, seeking comfort not only from what threatened them, but from the very act of tending to their own peace. The threads themselves may fade by morning, but the rhythm of protection and the gentle insistence of care endure, long after the spirits have passed on and the world wakes again. The unseen fast observed to guard against moon-maddened dreams. Picture yourself in the hush of a small, timbered cottage, where the rhythm of life is shaped not just by the sun and seasons, but by the quiet authority of the moon. In the centuries before electric light, each phase of the moon was not just a sight in the sky, but a presence that crept into the patterns and rituals of daily living. When the full moon approached, bathing fields and rooftops in pale, watchful light, the ordinary routines of the household shifted in response, not always with fanfare, but with a gentle, familiar care that was as much a part of life as drawing water or locking the door at dusk. Among these quiet adaptations was a custom known in some villages as the unseen fast. On certain nights, especially those when the full moon cast the world in silver clarity, families gathered for their evening meal with a deliberate restraint. The table might hold only simple bread, a small portion of broth, perhaps a cup of weak ale or a handful of dried apples. Sometimes, the meal was skipped altogether, the family agreeing to retire early and let hunger pass like a shadow, silent and unnoticed. The reason for this was not want or hardship alone, but a belief that rich foods, taken under the moon's intense gaze, could invite restless sleep, vivid dreams, and unsettling visions. You might imagine, as you settle into this old, flickering world, the way a mother would gently press her children to eat lightly as the last colors faded from the sky. There is a sense of ritual in the quiet table, the absence of stewed meats, the decision to leave the butter and the honey safely aside. In the rhythm of their lives, this restraint feels neither punishment nor deprivation, but simply a measure of safety, like shuttering the windows against a storm or turning the mirrors to the wall. The moon, after all, is not only a companion for poets and travelers. It is also, in the soft pulse of local belief, a force that can trouble the mind, twist the night's dreams, and leave the soul uneasy by dawn. The stories behind this practice are rarely written down, yet they pass from mouth to ear in gentle repetition. Perhaps someone once ate their fill of roast and cheese and dreamed so fiercely that they awoke gasping and pale. Perhaps a grandmother remembered the tale of an uncle who lost his wits after feasting on a moonlit night. And so the custom takes root, reinforced not by fear alone, but by the comfort of tradition and the wisdom of elders whose lives have always followed the cycles of the sky. Inside the cottage, the atmosphere on such nights is quietly expectant. The scent of simple bread and weak broth fills the air, mingling with the cool freshness that drifts in through cracks and unsealed windows. Outside, the fields glow softly, the world seeming thinner and more exposed. The boundaries between waking and dreaming, between the everyday and the uncanny, are never so thin as under a full, bright moon. In this world, the gentle act of eating less or not at all feels like a shield, subtle, almost invisible, but powerful in its quiet assurance. The moon's reputation as a bringer of madness is woven into the very language of the time. Lunacy, moonstruck, and moon-maddened are all echoes of a belief that the bright, unblinking eye of the night sky can unmoor the mind. To the villagers, sleep is a vulnerable state, and food, especially rich or heavy fare, is thought to render the mind more open to the moon's influence. There is a logic to the custom, a slow rhythm of caution that has kept families comfortable for generations. Dreams, after all, are not mere playthings here. They are warnings, omens, sometimes even messages, and no one wishes to invite a vision too strong to understand. Yet this fasting is not harsh or grim. The act is softened by routine, by the gentle way family members remind each other to keep the meal plain, by the comfort found in doing what has always been done. There is something quietly soothing in the repetition. The moon rises, the meal is modest, the house is quiet, the dreams, one hopes, are gentle. Even those who scoff at old beliefs might find themselves following the custom, if only for the sake of peace. As the night deepens and the moon climbs higher, the cottage settles. The last embers die in the hearth, the children's breathing becomes slow and even, and a sense of fragile safety takes hold. The world outside is luminous and strange, but within, there is the comfort of having honored a custom that stretches back through the years. When dreams come, they are, perhaps, less vivid. If a nightmare finds its way in, there is the reassurance of having done all that could be done. A small, unseen fast as a gentle defense against the intensity of the moon. With dawn, the custom is quietly set aside. Breakfast may be heartier, laughter returning to the table with the sun. But when the next full moon approaches, the cycle begins again. Subtle, soothing, a careful gesture against the mysterious power of dreams. So, as you let your mind wander and sleep approaches, imagine the gentle repetition of this ancient caution. A small act of care woven into the endless dance between earth, moon, and the dreams of those who lived beneath their watchful gaze. The custom of shuttering barn windows to keep animals calm. Imagine yourself waking to a world where dawn comes quietly, mist softening the outlines of distant trees and fields. In these villages of an earlier age, much of daily life revolved around the slow needs of animals: cows, horses, sheep, chickens, each one an investment, a companion, and a source of constant responsibility. Barns stood at the edge of every smallholding, their timbers weathered, roof lines sagging a little under the years, but always at the center of the farm's routine. Within those barns, the rhythm of animal life was as predictable as the changing of the moon. It was widely believed that the moon's light could stir even the calmest livestock into fits of restlessness. On certain nights, particularly when the moon was full, farmers paid special attention to every crack and window. Doors were barred, iron latches checked twice, and most crucially, every window was carefully shuttered. Some used thick wooden boards, others hung old woolen blankets or patched quilts, anything to keep even the faintest shaft of silver light from slipping into the hay-scented dark. These rituals were not taken lightly. In some places, an entire evening could be devoted to readying the barn, with children sent to search for stray nails or fabric, while the eldest family member inspected each opening for gaps. The act itself became a kind of communal choreography, a way for everyone to contribute to the well-being of the animals on which so much depended. The barn, once shuttered and swaddled in shadow, became an island of quiet certainty against the unpredictable world outside. The reasons for this custom were both practical and mysterious. Farmers spoke of nights when cattle would bellow or horses stamp and rear for no reason, hooves drumming the packed earth, eyes rolling in the half-dark. Some blamed wolves or wandering dogs, but many swore it was the moon, its bright, unnatural light turning the safe night into something alien and disturbing. Even a single sliver breaking through a knot-hole or cracked window was thought enough to rouse panic. Animals pressing against their stalls, sheep crowding into corners, chickens fluttering in a sudden uproar. Over time, these stories became warnings. One farmer might recall a night when a forgotten window left open led to a calf breaking loose, the barn in chaos by sunrise. Another might quietly remember how, years ago, moonlight was blamed for a nervous horse's stumble, an accident no one wanted to repeat. Word passed quietly from one generation to the next. Always shutter the barn against the moon. For all the caution, there was a kind of comfort in these nightly rituals. The act of shuttering windows and hanging blankets was as much about care as about fear. It was a way of drawing a gentle line between the world of humans and the world of animals, between what could be controlled and what could not. In the soft dark behind shuttered windows, the warmth of animals breathing, the slow shifting of bodies in straw, and the muted sounds of chewing or the occasional snort became signs that all was well. For a moment, The farm was suspended between moonlit uncertainty and the reliable calm of darkness. Some families developed their own traditions. A favorite old blanket might be reserved just for the barn, carefully folded and stored each month until the full moon returned. In some places, farmers hung charms or sprigs of certain herbs above the windows, hoping to ward off not just panic but any bad luck the night might bring. The work itself was repetitive, but never hurried. Children might be given the task of listening at the doors to make sure quiet settled within, a test of patience and attention. It's easy to see these customs as superstition alone, but they were rooted in observation and care. Animals, after all, are sensitive to light, and any sudden change, a bright moon after a week of darkness, a shadow moving across the window, could be enough to unsettle them. Yet, the belief that moonlight itself carried a peculiar power gave an added gravity to the task. The line between the practical and the mystical blurred, as it so often did in the slow drift of rural life. As you picture this world, the gentle hush of a barn at midnight, the moon bright above but not seen within, it becomes clear how much daily peace depended on rituals observed in silence. The animals, sleeping or stirring in their beds of straw, trusted the rhythms of those who cared for them. And the farmers, closing the last shutter, would pause for a moment, listening to the deep stillness they'd worked so carefully to protect. Long after sunrise, with the shutters opened and the blankets folded away, the story of each night would linger, sometimes only as a memory, sometimes as a tale quietly retold. The practice of shuttering barn windows became more than a precaution. It was an act of hope, an expression of responsibility, a nightly effort to keep chaos at bay and allow rest to settle in. In this gentle balance between vigilance and trust, you can sense the true rhythm of a world shaped as much by old beliefs as by the quiet bond between humans and animals. The secret carvings of protective symbols into stable doors. Imagine yourself walking the narrow lane that winds between a row of low, weathered stables at the edge of a small medieval village. The air is cool, thick with the scent of hay and old wood, and in the deepening dusk, every footstep sounds softer, as if the village itself is settling into sleep. The animals have been fed, their quiet movements muffled behind plank doors, and only a thin sliver of gold spills from the last open stable, illuminating the slow, careful work of a villager bent close to the doorframe. This is not the hour for conversation or laughter. It is a time of gentle rituals, of tasks that mark the passage between day and night. The stables, essential to every household's survival, are more than just shelters for livestock. They are, in their own way, the heart of village fortune. Horses, oxen, goats, and sheep mean milk, strength, and the hope of another year's good harvest. Their safety is the safety of the family itself. So when the light wanes and the moon begins its climb, villagers perform small, quiet acts of care, acts not written in law, but woven into the memory of the place. Tonight, you might watch as an elder takes a small knife or awl and kneels beside the heavy wooden door of a stable. Near the hinge, where wood meets iron, the villager carves with steady, practiced hands. The symbol chosen depends on memory and tradition. A stylized knot, a spiral, perhaps a cross within a circle, or the likeness of a sheaf of grain. Each shape holds meaning, some as old as the village itself, some borrowed from travelers or neighboring regions. The act is quiet, almost secretive. It is not meant for display or praise, but for protection. The belief is simple. On nights when the moon is full, unseen forces wander more freely, searching for warmth, mischief, or opportunity. Animals, gentle and trusting, are thought to be especially vulnerable. As the blade moves, it releases the faint scent of fresh-cut wood, mingling with the heavier odors of earth and animal. The marks themselves are small, often barely visible by daylight, but each carries a weight of hope and caution. Some villagers mutter a charm as they carve, others simply pause for a moment, touching the finished mark with a calloused thumb. The symbols are always placed close to the hinges, where movement and change are constant, places where, perhaps, the boundaries between outside and in are most fragile. Daily life in the village follows the cycle of care and vigilance. The stables are checked each morning, swept and mucked out, fresh straw scattered, and water buckets refilled. Animals are brushed, their flanks warming under rough hands. These routines are comforting, but they are never taken for granted. Illness, bad weather, or an unexpected fright can change fortunes overnight. In a world where explanations for trouble are few, and the line between safety and loss feels thin, the carvings become a kind of quiet insurance, a way to hold misfortune at bay. As dusk becomes night, the full moon rises, throwing pale shadows across the lane. The doors are latched and windows shuttered. Villagers retreat indoors, but the carved marks remain at their posts, silent guardians for the sleeping animals within. Some believe the marks confuse wandering spirits or creatures, sending them elsewhere. Others think the symbols attract the favor of old gods or saints who keep watch when human eyes cannot. No one claims to know for certain. Yet the tradition endures, repeated without fanfare, passed from hand to hand as the village itself endures. Occasionally, a visitor might notice the faint pattern of symbols and ask about their meaning. The answer is always gentle, understated. It's just something we do. For safety. The real explanations are felt rather than spoken. A shared understanding that in the rhythm of their lives, protection is built not only on fences and latches, but on the invisible faith woven through every gesture. With the new day, the symbols fade again into the background of wood and weather, part of the stable's very grain. Seasons change, animals are born and sold, doors replaced, yet the habit remains. Each new stable inherits its own secret markings, carved before the first animal crosses the threshold. The work is small, easily overlooked, but it is steady, a quiet act that says, "You are safe here for another night." And so, in the calm and caution of their evenings, the villagers find a measure of control over a world that so often feels unpredictable. The carvings on stable doors are not loud or grand. They are whispers of hope against the uncertainties that gather with the moonlight, a subtle promise that the boundaries between danger and comfort, loss and abundance, remain intact, at least until dawn. The habit of hiding silver items to prevent moon enchantment. Imagine yourself in a time when the silver moon was more than a distant light, when its slow journey across the night sky was felt deeply, shaping habits, beliefs, and quiet rituals inside every home. It is evening in a small, close-knit village. The fire burns low, and the room is thick with the scent of smoke and warming bread. Shadows flicker across the walls as family members prepare for the night, but tonight there is a particular hush, an unspoken understanding that the moon's fullness brings a special kind of risk. In this world, even the most ordinary objects, coins, spoons, brooches, are touched by the logic of old superstition. Daily life immersion, the ritual of hiding silver. Picture the end of a long day. As twilight deepens, a family gathers near the hearth. There is a sense of routine, the embers stirred, the ashes swept, the doors checked once more. But as the moon rises, attention turns to silver. The small silver coin earned from a market day, a cherished ring, a pair of delicate earrings handed down through generations, all are carefully collected, each piece wrapped in worn linen or tucked inside a folded cloth. No one raises their voice. The act is almost meditative, as if every member has performed it so often that it requires no instruction. One by one, the bundles are placed beneath a loose hearthstone or in the cool, dark hollow beside the stove. The sound is soft, the click of stone, the hush of cloth against brick, the whisper of a mother's reassurance to a child who asks, perhaps sleepily, why this must be done. The moon, they say, has a way of reaching in, especially for silver. Better to keep it hidden until morning, or, in some houses, until the next new moon. Biography/event, an inherited caution. No grand festival marks this ritual. Instead, it is a small event, woven into the background of everyday life, learned from older generations and seldom questioned. Elders recall stories of neighbors who forgot, a coin left on a window ledge, a locket hung by the bed, and who later blamed the moon for troubles that followed. Sometimes, the trouble was as simple as a lost trinket. Other times, it was a streak of bad fortune, illness, or quarrels that seemed to have no other cause. In the retelling, the warning is clear. Silver left out during the full moon absorbs not only light, but also unseen, unpredictable influences. Children might have asked, what does the moon want with silver? The answer varies. Some said it drew the moon's enchantment, making the metal unlucky or even dangerous. Others believed silver, because of its brightness, attracted spirits or energies best left undisturbed. No explanation was ever entirely satisfying, yet the ritual persisted, steady as the phases of the moon itself. Mystery, archaeology, culture. The silver connection. Why silver? The answer lies in a blend of symbolism and practicality. Silver has long been associated with purity, clarity, and, curiously, with the moon itself. Many cultures linked the moon's cold glow to the sheen of silver, seeing both as precious yet unpredictable. Silver objects reflected moonlight so sharply that it seemed they might capture more than just a pale glimmer. Over centuries, silver became a metal both revered and approached with caution, valued for its beauty and its supposed protective powers, but also believed to be a conduit for forces beyond human control. Archaeologists, sifting through the remains of old hearths and stone floors, sometimes discover hidden caches of coins or jewelry, wrapped and untouched, as if left behind by families who meant to return once the danger had passed. In written records, priests and chroniclers occasionally mention the old ways of safeguarding silver, sometimes dismissing them as superstition, but always acknowledging their endurance. Social elite, contrasting daily life, shared and secret practices. This was a custom observed by many, regardless of wealth. For the poor, it was a matter of safeguarding the few precious objects they possessed. For those in grander houses, silver was more plentiful, cutlery, candlesticks, coin, but the anxiety lingered all the same. In great kitchens, a housekeeper might quietly instruct a servant to gather spoons before nightfall. In smaller homes, a single coin might be hidden with as much care as a noblewoman's necklace. The ritual was democratic, a gentle equalizer, passed down not through decree, but through habit and whispered warning. Over time, as explanations for bad luck shifted and science crept quietly into the world, the practice faded. Silver lost its aura of vulnerability. Yet, in some places, the old caution lingered. Silver was still kept safe, sometimes more from habit than belief. Conclusion: rituals of protection, shadows of the past. So as you picture this night, moonlight spilling through small windows, fires crackling low, and families gathering their treasures, you sense the comfort of routine. There is reassurance in repetition, in the quiet certainty that something has been done to keep misfortune at bay. The bundles of silver hidden from the moon's gaze are small acts of hope, marking the boundary between the unpredictable outside world and the careful order of home. And when the sun finally rises, the hearthstone is lifted, the silver returned to its place in the open. The night has passed, the danger is gone, and life continues, each day quietly shaped by the memories and habits of those who came before, every ritual a thread in the long, invisible tapestry that binds us to our ancestors, and to the silent, watchful moon overhead. The whispered warnings not to gaze at the moon directly. Imagine a quiet countryside at dusk, the fields fading to a gentle blue as evening deepens, and a hush settling over the rooftops of cottages clustered together for warmth and companionship. Within these humble homes, the routines of bedtime begin as they always have: shutters drawn, lamps trimmed low, the last embers coaxed in the hearth. Children are gathered in the dim light, voices soft and movements slow, each waiting for the familiar comfort of night. But there is another routine, woven into the rhythm of these evenings: the soft warnings given by parents to their children, words passed down through generations and spoken almost as a lullaby. "Do not look at the moon too long," they murmur, smoothing a blanket or brushing hair from a brow. "Do not stare at her face." The tone is gentle, never scolding, but it lingers in the memory. An ordinary instruction that carries a weight both mysterious and oddly comforting. The origin of these warnings can be traced back through centuries, across cultures and continents. The moon, always present yet always changing, inspired awe and uncertainty in those who lived close to the rhythms of nature. Its pull on the tides was visible, but its effect on the mind and body seemed less easily explained. People noticed that sleep came uneasily on full moon nights, that dreams grew strange and restlessness crept through households. They told stories of how the moon could call to the unwary, weaving enchantment or illness into their thoughts. You might picture a child peering out a small window, the moon's pale light spilling across a floor thick with rushes. It is a sight both inviting and unsettling, the moon suspended high above the fields, cool and serene, watching as the world below drifts toward sleep. Yet, in these villages, to return her gaze was considered tempting fate, as if the act itself could open a door to something best left beyond reach. Parents, themselves once children who heeded these warnings, repeated them with gentle insistence. Some said that gazing into the moon's face would invite dreams from which you might not easily wake, dreams tinged with sickness or sorrow, so vivid that no charm or remedy could undo their effects. Others believed that the moon's gaze might mark you, making you more vulnerable to sudden fevers or quiet spells of melancholy that lingered for days. In times when medicine offered few answers, and when even small illnesses could carry weighty consequences, such cautions offered a way to explain and manage the invisible threats of night. It was not only children who were reminded to be cautious. Farmers returning late from the fields, shepherds who watched their flocks under the open sky, travelers caught on the road by nightfall, all were reminded to avert their eyes, to respect the power of the moon without challenging it directly. The moon's beauty was to be admired in passing, never confronted. This gentle restraint wove itself into the culture of the village, a shared understanding that united everyone in the unspoken work of protecting themselves and each other. Archaeological and folkloric evidence hints at the persistence of these beliefs. Across regions, one finds references to charms placed by windows, verses recited before bed, and talismans designed to deflect the moon's influence. In some places, a bowl of water was left to catch the moon's reflection, believed to absorb any harmful power and keep it from entering the household. In others, stories were told of people who, after staring too long at the moon, wandered their days in a daze, never quite the same as before. Despite the subtle fear underlying these warnings, the atmosphere remained calm and measured. No one panicked or rushed. Instead, the advice was delivered in a tone almost indistinguishable from other daily instructions. Wash your hands before supper, mind the embers, don't stare at the moon. This gentle repetition lent the warning a kind of comfort, shaping the boundary between safety and risk in a way that soothed rather than alarmed. Over time, the fear of moon gazing softened. As understanding of the natural world grew, and as remedies for illness improved, the warnings became less a matter of life and death and more a quaint tradition. Yet, the practice of soft restraint persisted, a ritual of care and caution embedded in the fabric of family life. Even now, in the rare village where stories are told by firelight and children still sleep beneath thick quilts, you might hear a parent gently remind a restless child not to look too long at the moon, just in case. It is easy, with modern eyes, to see these warnings as superstition, a relic of an anxious past. Yet there is a certain logic in the practice, a recognition that not everything beautiful is harmless, and that some boundaries are best respected even when not fully understood. The moon, with its cool, distant light, offered both comfort and caution. Its rhythms gave shape to the month, its light guided travelers, its face inspired both song and silence. The world outside those quiet cottages was vast and often uncertain. In the simple act of reminding children not to gaze too long at the moon, parents provided a sense of structure, a gentle assurance that even the mysteries of night could be navigated with care. The warning itself became a lullaby of its own, whispered in the darkness as sleep drew near. So, as you imagine yourself in that long-ago village, hear the warning not as a scolding, but as a soft, protective refrain, a way of sheltering the household from the unknown, while honoring the enduring bond between parent and child, night and sleep, wonder and caution. And as the moon rises above the rooftops, silent and serene, the world settles once again into the gentle rhythm of rest and forgetting, carrying the old warning quietly into another night. The practice of closing village gates before moonrise began. Imagine yourself at the edge of a quiet village, surrounded by low stone walls and sturdy timber gates. The air is still and cool, with the last gold of sunset pooling in the ruts of well-worn paths. In the distance, the gentle sound of cattle lowing, the rhythmic clatter of a pail, and the faint laughter of children drift across the fields. It is an evening much like any other, until you notice a subtle change in the rhythm of village life. As the first pale glow of the moon gathers on the horizon, a sense of quiet urgency begins to ripple through the community. This is the hour when villagers set aside their tools, sweep out their doorways, and gather children close. Conversations grow softer. Lanterns are checked, and door latches are tested. Before the moon's full brightness rises to bathe the world in cold silver, a time-honored custom takes over: the closing and barring of the village gates. It is a practice observed so often for so many generations that it feels less like a rule and more like a comforting part of the day's ending. A ritual performed not out of fear, but out of a quiet wish for safety and belonging. The gates themselves are simple, often built from rough-hewn timbers or heavy planks, weathered smooth by years of use. They creak as they swing shut, a sound both familiar and faintly solemn. Across the threshold, a heavy bar is dropped into place, the thud echoing down the main lane. Smaller paths leading out to fields or forest are blocked by iron gates or, in some places, by bundles of thorny brush laid across the trail. Even narrow footpaths are remembered, each one carefully closed off, as if sealing the village against the world outside. Imagine the scene. The last stragglers hurry back through the main gate, arms full of baskets, tools, or sleeping children. They nod to the watchman, whose eyes are trained on the darkening road beyond. The ritual is not frantic, but measured, performed with a certain gentleness. For in these communities, protection is a shared effort, and the gate is both a physical barrier and a quiet symbol of unity. To close it is to draw a line between what is known and trusted, and what is uncertain, perhaps even dangerous. The reasons for this nightly closure are woven from practical need and deeper, older anxieties. On the one hand, the closed gates keep out wandering thieves, vagrants, or wild animals that might stray too close in the night. On the other, there is an unspoken sense that the darkness beyond the walls belongs to another world, a place of spirits, omens, and the unpredictable pull of the moon. Folklore whispers that the full moon stirs strange forces, that to leave the gate open is to invite the unknown into the heart of the village. The boundary must be respected, the inside made safe, the outside left to its own secrets. Inside the village, as the gates are barred, a certain peace settles. You can almost feel it, the slow release of tension, the shift from vigilance to rest. Villagers gather by the hearth, sharing bread, stories, and the soft companionship of family and neighbors. Sometimes, a watchman will patrol the length of the wall, lantern in hand, pausing now and then to listen to the quiet world outside. The darkness beyond the gates grows thick and impenetrable, punctuated only by the pale, steady shine of the moon overhead. For outsiders, travelers arriving late, merchants delayed on the road, the closing of the gates is an unmistakable message. Entry must wait until morning. It is not a gesture of unkindness, but of self-preservation, a recognition that the night, and especially a moon-bright night, belongs to those within the walls. Some outsiders might set up camp just beyond the boundary, fires flickering in the shadows, waiting for the dawn and the promise of welcome within. This routine is so regular, so quietly repeated, that it becomes a source of comfort. To know the gates are closed is to know you are watched over, that your world, for this night at least, is small and contained. It is a boundary not just of wood and stone, but of trust, a reassurance that even as the moon illuminates every hidden corner outside, inside, there is order and care. As the hours pass and the moon traces its arc above, the village sleeps in relative ease. Dreams come and go, sometimes troubled by memories or wild imagination, but always with the knowledge that the world outside is held at bay by ancient custom and sturdy wood. When morning finally comes and the first light seeps over the hills, the ritual is quietly reversed. The bars are lifted, the gates swing open, and the paths are cleared, as if the night separation had never existed. And so, in this gentle, rhythmic fashion, the practice of closing the village gates becomes part of the invisible architecture of safety and belonging, performed not with alarm, but with the measured patience of people who have long understood the need for boundaries and the comfort to be found within them. As you drift toward sleep, you might carry with you the sense of a village quietly resting, protected beneath the arc of the moon, its gates firmly closed until morning comes again. The custom of covering cradles so infants slept in darkness. Imagine yourself in a quiet cottage on the edge of a small, winding lane, where the world outside is hushed except for the faint sigh of wind against the shutters and the steady rhythm of a hearth's slow-burning glow. Inside, life unfolds at a gentle pace, meals simmering, worn hands folding linens, and the soft creak of floorboards as mothers and grandmothers move from room to room, tending to all that must be tended. In one corner, beneath a low window, stands a wooden cradle. Its paint is softened by time and the careful touch of many generations. It rocks with a rhythm so familiar that, even now, it feels as natural as a heartbeat. Long ago, and in many places still, it was the custom to shroud this cradle each night, and often even by day, with a length of cloth. Sometimes it was a soft sheet, sometimes a finely woven shawl, and sometimes a square of heavy wool for the coldest seasons. The purpose was always the same: to cocoon the sleeping infant in darkness, shielding delicate eyes not only from the flicker of firelight but, most especially, from the bright gaze of the moon. The moon was both beautiful and mysterious, its light waxing and waning over rooftops and meadows, guiding tides and keeping secrets. Yet to those who watched over the youngest and most fragile, it was also a source of quiet unease. Stories passed gently from one mother to another, or whispered at the fireside, insisted that moonlight falling on an infant's face could leave an invisible mark. Some said it called fever, as if the light itself carried a chill that would settle in the bones of a child, bringing sickness in the days or years to come. Others believed the moon's glow might open a child's spirit to sorrowful dreams, or even shadowed visions that would follow them for a lifetime. It is easy now to see only the superstition, but in an age before medicine could offer much comfort and before the world was reliably safe, mothers did all they could to protect their children from the unknown. Every cradle was placed with care, away from windows, away from the sweep of moonbeams on full, clear nights. As evening fell, a cloth was draped with a gentle hand, edges tucked to block even the faintest light. The baby inside would be lulled by the hush, surrounded by the soft scent of linen, the subtle warmth of wool, and the comforting darkness that promised a barrier against all the world's unseen dangers. If you listen, you might hear a lullaby, barely more than a hum, repeated over centuries, words changed and forgotten, but the tune always familiar. Sometimes, a mother would sit by the cradle as the moon rose, watching her child sleep, one hand resting lightly on the folded cloth. The act itself became a ritual, as soothing for the parent as for the child. A signal that, for this night at least, everything possible had been done. Some families believed that certain colors or fabrics held special protective powers. A blue shawl, a linen with a hand-stitched charm at its corner, a swatch of fabric that had belonged to an ancestor. These items took on a meaning beyond their practical use. In some places, grandmothers would pass down the same piece of cloth, mended and embroidered over the years, to cradle new generations in its familiar dark. Not every mother believed in curses, just as not every child fell ill. But in a world where fevers could arrive suddenly, and sadness sometimes seemed to pass from parent to child, the risk was not worth ignoring. The moon's face, beautiful and distant, became something to respect, a reminder of how much lay outside a parent's control. The act of covering a cradle was as much about hope as it was about fear, a small gesture meant to hold back all that was unpredictable and mysterious. Sometimes, there were nights when the moon's light was unavoidable, a gap in the curtain, a crack in the shutter, a forgotten cloth. On such mornings, mothers watched their babies closely, searching for signs of fever or fretfulness, trusting that love and care would be enough. Even when nothing happened, the lesson remained. The world is full of unseen forces, but simple acts, folding a cloth, humming a tune, watching over a cradle, could offer comfort and protection even in the darkest hours. With time, as new ideas and medicines reached these quiet cottages, the practice of covering cradles began to fade. Yet, the memory lingers in family stories, and sometimes in the rituals that parents invent for themselves. A shade drawn, a soft blanket tucked around a newborn, a whispered hope that the night will be kind. As you imagine this scene, the hush of a room, the moonlight glancing harmlessly off drawn cloth, a child sleeping in perfect peace, You sense how history is built from such moments. A custom born of love, anxiety, and the yearning to keep what is most precious safe from harm. In the gentle darkness, you glimpse the old rhythm of care and quiet protection, folded neatly into the fabric of nightly life, and still softly echoing in the distance between moon and cradle. The belief that full moonlight summoned hidden grudges. Imagine yourself beneath a cloudless sky, where the full moon hangs low and luminous above a patchwork of fields and stone lanes. Its light, cold and unwavering, touches the roofs of every house and turns the garden paths silver. This is not a night for celebration, nor for gatherings. There's a stillness in the air, and as you step quietly between homes, you notice how every doorway is closed, every shutter drawn tight. On such nights, the villagers retreat into their own quiet corners, voices hushed and eyes lingering on the play of shadows across the floor. For as long as anyone could remember, the full moon was said to awaken things best left undisturbed. The old tales insisted it was not only the restless spirits of the dead who wandered in moonlight, but the old wounds of the living as well. The village's memory was long, stretching back through quarrels over boundary stones, unreturned favors, words spoken and regretted, and moments of pride or jealousy that had never truly faded. Under the ordinary dark of night, these grudges slumbered, buried by the weight of routine and necessity. But when the moon shone bright and high, there was a quiet belief that such memories might stir, rising to the surface with a force as cold and insistent as the moonlight itself. On these nights, the rhythm of daily life changed in subtle ways. Work in the fields finished early, and neighbors who might otherwise linger for conversation at the crossroads found reasons to hurry home. The laughter of children faded sooner, and mothers called them inside with voices lower than usual. If you looked into the window of a cottage, you'd find families speaking softly, if at all, sharing bread and soup in the kind of gentle silence that feels both restful and protective. Even the animals sensed the shift, huddling closer together in their stalls, their breath rising in soft clouds against the chill. Within each home, stories were told in low, careful tones. Some elders recalled a time when two brothers, once inseparable, had parted ways after a harsh word exchanged under a full moon, never to reconcile. Others spoke of feuds that began with a careless remark in the brightness of moonlight and grew, season by season, until entire families crossed the lane in silence, unable to recall how the distance had started but powerless to end it. These tales lingered not as warnings, but as reminders. Under the full moon, silence was safer than speech, restraint wiser than honesty. You might think of grudges as distant, abstract things, but in the world of the village, they were as real as the stones that lined the well. Each household bore its own quiet history, its own unspoken list of wrongs endured and forgiveness withheld. Sometimes, reconciliation happened over the sharing of harvest, or at a wedding, or when illness came and pride was set aside for the sake of help. More often, though, the past was left undisturbed, its edges softened by time but never quite erased. The full moon, with its unblinking eye, threatened to unearth what the daylight had hidden. To protect against this, villagers developed quiet rituals of avoidance. A neighbor who might otherwise stop by with eggs or milk would pass by in silence, acknowledging you only with a nod. Conversations were kept brief, business conducted with a gentle formality. If there were errands to be done or requests to be made, they waited for another night. Some families kept a sprig of rosemary or a charm near the door, believing these would absorb the moon's energy and dampen the old resentments that might otherwise flare. The moon's cycle became a kind of calendar for these social rhythms. When it waned, warmth returned to the village lanes, and old friends would sit together again beneath the eaves, sharing stories or mending fences. But on full moon nights, the quiet became almost palpable, a mutual understanding, renewed with each passing month, that it was better to let sleeping memories lie. This belief, like so many others, was not universal or absolute. Some scoffed, insisting that words and wounds owed nothing to the moon's silver gaze. Yet even these skeptics tended to tread lightly on such nights, preferring the comfort of their own firesides to the uncertainty of old conflicts stirred awake. Perhaps it was habit, or perhaps it was the echo of lived experience. Too many stories of friendships fractured or alliances lost in a single moment of unguarded speech. As the moon traced its path across the sky, the village held its collective breath. The hours passed, and the danger faded. By dawn, the world seemed softer, the edges of old grudges once again blurred by the gentle work of daylight. In the rhythm of their lives, the villagers learned to move with the cycles of shadow and light, honoring, in their own quiet way, the mysteries of memory, forgiveness, and restraint. And so, under the gaze of the full moon, neighbors chose silence over confrontation, reflection over reaction, hoping that by keeping old grudges undisturbed, they might keep the fragile piece of their small world intact, at least until the sun rose again. The habit of whispering protective chants over hearth embers. Imagine yourself at the close of an ordinary day in a time when fire was the silent heart of the home. Outside, the village lies hushed under a gentle night. Far from city lights and clocks, the world moves to the slow rhythm of natural darkness, lit only by the soft spill of the moon and the embers flickering in each cottage hearth. For generations, families have ended their days with a simple but quietly meaningful ritual, a habit neither grand nor formal, yet filled with the subtle gravity of tradition. As the last tasks fade and quiet settles, someone leans toward the fire's glow and softly whispers a chant over the glowing coals. Daily life immersion, the rhythm of the evening. The evening draws in, and the rooms grow dim. Shadows gather in the corners, and the only source of warmth or light is the hearth, tended with steady hands throughout the day. The smell is earthy, with smoke, a little ash, perhaps a trace of drying herbs hung from the rafters. The fire is carefully managed, logs banked, embers arranged so that a faint glow will last through the night, ready to be coaxed into flame at dawn. Before retiring, the family lingers a moment longer. You can imagine a mother, father, or sometimes a grandparent bending close to the hearth. The words spoken are never loud, often little more than a gentle murmur. Sometimes the chant is a familiar verse, repeated every night. Sometimes it's simply improvised, a wish for restful sleep, a plea for safety, or a prayer to keep harm at bay until the sun returns. Children might listen drowsily from nearby pallets, comforted by the low, rhythmic sound. Biography/event echoes through generations. This practice is not born of public ceremony, but of memory, habit, and the wisdom of ancestors. There is rarely a record of the precise words. Each family's chant is a little different, shaped by dialect, belief, or the fleeting mood of the speaker. Some families remember a grandparent who spoke verses in a dialect now forgotten. Others recall how the words seemed to matter less than the intent behind them. For many, it's simply the act of speaking that matters, a final thread tying the waking world to the world of dreams. In the oldest stories, a house whose fire burned out at night risked more than cold. It was said the warmth of the hearth could anchor the soul, shielding dreams from wandering spirits, anxieties, or the mysterious influences that drifted in with the moon. There are gentle warnings, handed down quietly. To let the hearth go cold is to leave your household unmoored, adrift beneath the moon's gaze. Mystery, archaeology, culture, hearth as guardian and anchor. The idea that fire could protect and guide is older than written history. Archaeologists have uncovered ancient hearths ringed with charms, bone tokens, and soot-blackened stones, suggesting the hearth was seen as a guardian, not just against winter's chill, but against the invisible dangers of night. The chants, though ephemeral, are echoed in the folklore of many lands. In some places, people recited lines asking the coals to hold the warmth or carry our sleep to morning. In others, the verses named protective spirits or ancestors, inviting them to linger until dawn. The act is more than superstition, it's a gentle kind of mindfulness. The fire's steady glow, the soft cadence of whispered words, the repetition of ritual, these soothe the household, marking the transition from waking to rest. The hearth becomes both a literal and symbolic anchor, a fixed point in the drifting sea of night. Social, elite, contrasting daily life, widespread yet personal. Though most common in humble cottages, the habit crossed all boundaries. In larger homes and manor houses, the last staff member to pass by the great kitchen hearth might whisper a few protective words, just as in the smallest hut a parent might chant to coals with a sleeping child in their arms. The specifics varied, but the impulse was universal: to tie the household together, to close the day with hope, and to trust the gentle warmth to watch over dreams. Unlike formal prayers or church rites, these chants were almost always private, shared within the family, unknown to outsiders. In this way, the nightly ritual was a thread connecting ordinary people to the deep and ancient cycle of sleep and waking, danger and safety, darkness and dawn. Conclusion: ritual, reassurance, and the hearth's last glow. As the moonlight slips across the thatch and the last ember winks in the grate, you sense the comfort in this nightly routine. Words murmur over glowing coals, wishes for safety and rest woven into the rhythm of breath and fire. The chant does not guarantee anything. No spell can truly hold misfortune at bay, but it gives shape to hope and anchors each heart to the warmth of home. Long after the fire dies and dreams have wandered far, the memory of those whispered words lingers, quiet, protective, and gently persistent, like the slow heartbeat of the house itself. In the end, it is these smallest of rituals, half-remembered and softly spoken, that hold families close across generations, safe beneath the silent, watchful gaze of the moon. The ritual of leaving a single candle to guide the good spirits. Imagine the village at nightfall, the world shrinking to a scatter of warm, quiet lights pressed up against the long hush of darkness. Most households have drawn their shutters tight and blown out every lamp, each family closing the day with routines as old as memory, tucking away tools, banking the embers in the hearth, whispering a last word or two before bed. Yet if you walked the lanes beneath a full moon, you might notice something unexpected. In a few windows, a single candle remains, its glow delicate and steady against the night. This lone candle is not a forgotten flame or a careless gesture. Instead, it's a purposeful act, a soft, flickering beacon left to guide the gentle spirits of the night. For centuries, in many villages, this small ritual threaded itself into the ordinary fabric of evening life. It was an offering, a symbol, and a comfort all at once. You might picture it, the moment just before sleep, when every lamp is doused but one. The candle is carefully placed in the window, its slender wick trimmed, the flame coaxed to life with a steady hand. Around it, the world is thick with the scent of cooling earth and the fading heat of stones. Outside, the countryside is hushed, fields lying silver beneath the moon, and even the animals move softly, as if careful not to disturb the gentle balance that holds the dark at bay. The belief at the heart of this ritual was simple. Not all spirits were to be feared. While stories abounded of mischief or harm brought by wandering presences, there were also tales of benevolent spirits, ancestors, protectors, guardians who walked unseen through the lanes at night. These good spirits, it was said, could bring luck or solace, guide lost travelers, or simply watch over the living as they slept. But the night was confusing, a maze of shadows and shifting boundaries. It was easy, so the stories went, for even the kindest spirit to lose its way. And so, a little mercy was extended, a candle in the window, a quiet invitation for goodness to pass by the door, to bring blessing instead of harm. The act itself became a sort of pact, a little flame offered up in exchange for protection, kindness, or a peaceful night's rest. No one expected grand miracles. Instead, the candle's promise was modest, a gentle encouragement for peace to settle in, for troubles to ease, for sleep to come quietly and stay until morning. It was a simple act, repeated night after night, comforting in its familiarity. In some households, the ritual was accompanied by a silent wish or a soft-spoken prayer. A mother might pause as she lit the wick, murmuring the names of those who had gone before or those who needed special care. A child, peeking from a blanket, might watch the flames dance and imagine it as a signal, reaching far beyond the window glass. In these small ways, the candle became not just a physical light, but a bridge, linking the living and the unseen, hope and uncertainty, solitude and belonging. There was a certain etiquette to the ritual too. The candle was never left to burn unattended for too long. It was often set in a sturdy holder, away from curtains and straw, watched over until sleep pressed too heavy to resist. In some places, special candles were made, thicker and slower to burn, scented with herbs said to invite gentle spirits and deter the troublesome ones. In others, a simple tallow candle sufficed, its ordinary light enough to fulfill the promise. Not every window held a candle each night. The ritual was most common during full moons, at the turning of seasons, or in times of worry and change, a birth, an illness, a year of uncertain weather. In those moments, the act of lighting a single flame became a declaration. Tonight, mercy was needed. Tonight, the door stood open to blessing. Wealth and status shaped the details, but rarely the meaning. In larger houses, the candle might be set in a glass lantern, polished and bright. In humbler cottages, it might be nothing more than a stub of wax on a clay saucer. Yet the message was always the same, a sign to whatever good spirit might be wandering, a token of welcome in an otherwise darkened world. Archaeologists sometimes discover window ledges singed by countless little flames, or candle stubs buried with household belongings. In old letters and parish records, there are occasional references to the spirit light, the mercy candle, or the traveler's flame. These traces, though faint, hint at the long memory of this ritual, an act so ordinary that it rarely drew special mention, and yet so persistent that it quietly survived through centuries of changing faiths and customs. Even as knowledge grew and beliefs shifted, the habit of leaving a little light continued. In some places, it merged with new festivals or was adapted to fit changing times, guiding not just spirits, but neighbors, loved ones, or even weary travelers making their way home. The meaning blurred and softened, but the comfort remained. So, as you imagine yourself wandering those old, moonlit lanes, notice the glow of a single candle trembling ever so slightly in the darkness. Let it remind you of the subtle ways people have shaped their nights, not by banishing all uncertainty, but by making a quiet peace with it. The candle's flame might be small, but its promise is gentle and enduring. A little flame, a little mercy, offered to the world beyond the window as the house settles into sleep.